Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Trumbore with your nightly review for Thursday, April 4th. It's little Anthony in the Imperials week. Here at Stocks and News. The Mets are down 2-0, middle of the 8th inning at Sunny City Field. Dow Jones finished up 56 points. Should have mentioned it's 4:02 Eastern Time. To close at 14,606, up 0.4%. S&P 500 up 6 points, also 0.4% to 1560. NASDAQ up 5 or 0.2%. Gold closed at 1552, oil 93.30, and the 10-year Treasury is all the way down to 1.76%. Jobless claims shot up this week, 28,000 to 385,000, the highest weekly number since November 24th. The average forecast was for 353,000, but it appears there are quirks with the Easter holiday and data being seasonally adjusted, and the number should be adjusted next week, probably back to the 355 area is my guess. JP Morgan Chase is calling for GDP growth in the first quarter of 3.8%, but then declining to a 1.5% rate in the second quarter. And Washington is back from its recess next week. I know you join me in wishing they were always on recess. It's been just very relaxing. I feel so much better when they are away. Overseas, London, Paris, and Frankfurt were all down 0.7 to 1.2%. I'll get into the sick European data in a minute, but today was really all about the Bank of Japan. Tokyo's Nikkei finished up 2.2% to 12,634. The Nikkei average is up 45% since mid-November. So today, the Bank of Japan and Governor Kuroda began their campaign to end 15 years of falling prices by doubling monthly bond purchases in a bid to reach 2% inflation in 2 years. The BOJ will purchase about $80 billion of bonds, 78.6 a month, and double the monetary base in 2 years. So the yen fell the most since October 2011 on that news. The BOJ said their actions would boost Japan's monetary base from $1.43 trillion to $2.86 trillion by March of 2015, mainly by buying more long-term government bonds. Heretofore, they've been buying more on the short end of the curve. Now, this gives you a sense of the scope of the plan. Under the new measures, the Bank of Japan will expand its balance sheet by 1% of gross domestic product each month this year, and by 1.1% per month in 2014. That's according to estimates from Barclays. By comparison, so 1.1% for Japan. By comparison, the U.S. Federal Reserve's current monetary policy, their easing, involves increasing the balance sheet by 0.5% of GDP per month. So Japan's move is massive. In December, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, of course, had telegraphed all this when he led his party to victory by pledging to fire 3 arrows to end stagnation: monetary stimulus, fiscal spending, and cutting regulation to increase investment and hiring. But Japan's demographics, a declining population, and a government debt that is more than twice the size of the economy, like 250%, are rather major constraints. BOJ Governor Kuroda said we can't escape deflation with the incremental approach that's been taken until now. We need to use every means available. Japan has had 3 recessions in the past 5 years. So, in Europe, a composite of services and manufacturing by market, M-A-R-K-I-T, fell to 46.5 from 47.9 in March. That is below 50 on the composite for 14 straight months. An index of Euro area services activity declined to 46.4 in March from 47.9 in February. In Germany, the composite declined to 50.6 from 53.3 in February, so near stagnation. As Chris Williamson, chief economist for Market, put it, the unresolved election in Italy was commonly cited as a key factor clouding the economic outlook in March, and the botched bailout of Cyprus could well filter through to a further worsening of business sentiment across the region in April. Mr. Williamson added that the weak showing from Germany suggests that the only source of bright light in an otherwise gloomy region has once again begun to fade. France's composite, services and manufacturing together, fell to 41.9 in March, which is the worst in France since March of 2009. In Italy, a new government is not expected for weeks. Auto sales in Italy are expected to decline 21% this year, according to analysts there. In the first quarter, Fiat's Ferrari unit saw sales in Italy decline 36%. VW's Porsche unit in Italy also fell 36% in the first quarter. Well, with all this in mind, the European Central Bank today left interest rates on hold for a 9th month in a row. European Central Bank President Mario Draghi said the bank stands ready, nonetheless, to cut interest rates if the economy deteriorates further. He always says that. It is deteriorating further. He added, our monetary policy stance will remain accommodative for as long as needed. We will assess all the incoming data in the coming weeks and we stand ready to act. I've been telling you about the incoming data this week. It sucks. Draghi maintained risk to the economic outlook remain on the downside. And inflation is edging down well below the ECB's 2% target. It will slow to 1.3% next year from 1.6% this year. Draghi also noted the initial plan to make small savers pay for the Cyprus bailout was not smart, and that the proposal to make insured depositors pay did not come from the ECB, the European Commission, or the IMF. He said the proposal only arose in talks with the Cypriot authorities and was swiftly corrected. You have a pecking order, and here the insured depositor should be the very last category to be touched, said Draghi. The European Commission draft directive foresees exactly this. Draghi told his news conference that the Cyprus bailout was not a blueprint for what would happen in further bailouts. Cyprus is no template. He said, back to Italy and the government situation. Matteo Renzi, a popular reformist mayor of Florence and would-be prime minister who has actually the highest ratings among potential prime ministers in opinion polls, broke his silence over the political paralysis by challenging the national leadership of the center-left Democratic Party and declared his readiness to run for office in new elections. Renzi is just 38 years old. He threw down the gauntlet by calling on Pierluigi Bersani, leader of the Democrats, either to abandon his opposition to forming a coalition government with Silvio Berlusconi's center-right party or prepare for an early rerun of February's general election. Renzi said, Italy is totally stalled, companies are closing, unemployment is rising, and politics is wasting time. Even the church, Renzi went on, not noted as a model of speed, has responded more quickly. Moving to North Korea. They dramatically escalated their warlike rhetoric today, Thursday, warning that it had authorized plans for nuclear strikes on targets in the United States. The moment of explosion is approaching fast, the North Korean military said, warning that war could break out today or tomorrow. In a statement published by the state KCNA news agency, the Korean People's Army General Staff warned Washington that U.S. threats would be smashed by cutting-edge, smaller, lighter, and diversified nuclear strike means. The merciless operation of our revolutionary armed forces in this regard has been finally examined and ratified. North Korea moved a missile with considerable range to its east coast, according to South Korea's defense minister. Kim Kwan-yin dismissed reports in Japanese media that the missile could be a KN-08, which is believed to be a long-range missile that, if operable, could hit the United States. This is, again, as the South Korean defense minister, Kim, told lawmakers at a hearing that the missile's range is considerable, but not far enough to hit the U.S. mainland. He said he did not know the reasons behind the missile movement, saying it could be for testing or drills. From what we know of its existing inventory, North Korea has short and medium-range missiles that could complicate a situation on the Korean peninsula and perhaps reach Japan. But we have not seen any evidence that it has long-range missiles that could strike the continental U.S., Guam, or Hawaii. Now that last quote, I apologize, that was actually from James Hardy, editor of Jane's Defense Weekly. Back to Kim, the South Korean defense minister. He said his military has spotted no signs that Korea is preparing for a full-scale conflict. North Korea's recent threats, he added, are rhetorical threats. I believe the odds of a full-scale provocation are small. A spokesman for the Korean People's Army said, we formally inform the White House and Pentagon that the ever-escalating U.S. hostile policy toward the DPRK and its reckless nuclear threat will be smashed by the strong will of all the United Service personnel and people in cutting-edge, smaller and lighter and diversified nuclear strike means, as I said previously. The DPRK, North Korea, added the U.S. had better ponder over the prevailing grave situation. Now, Siegfried Hecker, the Stanford scientist who is, to me, the foremost authority on North Korea, because he's been taken to see their plants, he said, I don't believe North Korea has the capacity to attack the United States with nuclear weapons mounted on missiles and won't for many years. Its ability to target and strike South Korea is also very limited. And even if Pyongyang had the technical means, why would the regime want to launch a nuclear attack when it fully knows that any use of nuclear weapons would result in a devastating military response and would spell the end of the regime? In Seoul, a senior government official said on Tuesday it wasn't clear how advanced North Korea's nuclear weapons capabilities are, but he also noted fallout from any strike on Seoul would of course reach Pyongyang as well. British Prime Minister David Cameron today in Scotland said North Korea's escalation of nuclear threats against the U.S. presents a real concern. He said North Korea does now have missile technology that is able to reach the whole of the U.S. And then Cameron added, if so, they can reach Europe and us too. Joseph Bermudez, a leading military analyst, said North Korea is incapable of hitting the U.S. and its chances of winning or even surviving a second war with South Korea and the U.S. are poor. Colin Powell said, I do not see the prospect of conflict as some of my friends in the United States do. They bluster, they threaten, they say things they cannot do. Sung-Yun Lee, a professor of Korea Studies at the Fletcher School at Tufts University, said if there were to be a war, North Korea would surely lose and the Kim dynasty would come to an end. They are most unlikely to launch an all-out war. They are highly rational, just with a different set of standards. Retired U.S. Admiral Dennis Blair said, I'm not relaxed about this one. I think this one's more dangerous than in 2010 because of the youth and inexperience of Kim, who took over in July after his father's death. According to the International Institute for Strategic Studies, North Korea may have been able to develop a warhead over the past decade that is small and light enough to be delivered using a Nodong missile. That's a missile with a range of about 900 miles. But there's insufficient information to make a confident assessment, and that's my problem. Our intelligence is absolutely awful, verging on non-existent when it comes to North Korea. The whole key is if you hear one morning that from the South Koreans that there is some kind of mobilization taking place, then the market ought to go down about 500 points on that. But I maintain North Korea is gearing up for a strike, like on a South Korean naval vessel, or shelling the island they did in 2010, and they will miscalculate South Korea's response. That's my take, and I'm sticking to it. About 700,000 North Korean troops are within 60 miles of the demilitarized zone. Someday I'm going to spend a lot of time on one of these videos talking about my experience at the DMZ, which was in exactly 7 years ago in 2006. Seoul is just 30 miles from the North Korean border, or from the DMZ. Well, that's all for today. I'm going to be back with you tomorrow. I'm going to be back with you on Monday. I write Week in Review on Fridays. I post it early Saturday morning. Check it out at stocksnews.com. Have a great weekend. Take care.